government has denounced attacks by irregular armed groups from Colombia in a border town of the Venezuelan state of Apure. Several nations across Latin America are facing a surge in COVID-19 cases, with health systems on the verge of collapse. In France, coinciding with the Night of Solidarity, several associations supporting the homeless and asylum seekers set up 300 tents in a central Paris square. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. The President of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Jorge Rodriguez, denounced attacks by irregular armed groups from Colombia in Venezuelan territory. During a press conference, the parliamentarian condemned the recent attacks committed by armed groups against the population of La Victoria, located in the state of Apure, while reiterating the National Assembly's total support to the government of President Nicolás Maduro Moros. Rodriguez also pointed out that the constant attacks against Venezuela and our attempts against the sovereignty and peace of the nation. He also informed that the National Assembly is investigating the different attacks orchestrated against Venezuela in Colombian territory, among them the frustrated assassination attempt against President Nicolás Maduro Moros and the 2020 mercenary incursion known as Operation Gideon.
The National Assembly of Venezuela extends its full and resounding support to the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and Commander-in-Chief of the National Bolivarian Armed Forces, Nicolás Maduro, to the Minister of People's Power for Defense, General-in-Chief Vladimir Pradrino Lopez, and the Strategic Operational Commander, Admiral Remigio Ceballos, together with all the components of our glorious and brave National Bolivarian Armed Forces, in the decisive tactical operations of the Bolivarian Shield, who, in the exercise of their powers and in adherence with the Constitution, effectively safeguarded our sovereignty and will not allow in any way the operations of irregular armed groups in Venezuela. The National Assembly of Venezuela extends its full and resounding.
And Jorge Rodriguez urged the authorities of the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry to take the necessary steps at the international level to ensure the territorial sovereignty of the nation.
This Parliament urges the Ministry of People's Power for Foreign Affairs to carry out the necessary international actions in favor of territorial sovereignty and to denounce the aggressions to which we are subjected before human rights bodies, Venezuela and its democratic government, with the Bolivarian spirit of the great homeland, wish that the Colombian people advance on the path towards definite peace. We will persist in the defense of our rights and in the fulfillment of our sacred duty to safeguard our territorial integrity and the lives of our beloved population.
In this context, the government of Venezuela denounced the attacks by armed groups from Colombia that targeted the population of a border town in Apure state. Venezuelan authorities stated that the attacks were targeted against employees and assets of the electric power company Corpoelec. Additionally, they denounced the attacks against the headquarters of the National Integrated Tax and Customs Administration, a building of the Bolivarian National Guard, as well as infrastructure of the state-owned oil and natural gas company PDVSA. During clashes with the assailants, the Bolivarian National Guard neutralized one of the leaders, known as El Nando, captured 32 individuals, destroyed 6 camps, and confiscated weapons, ammunition, explosives, and drugs. The operation were conducted as part of the Bolivarian Shield, military exercises promoted by President Nicolás Maduro, who called for zero tolerance towards armed groups attempting to operate in the country. The Attorney General of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, announced the opening of an investigation into the seizure of assets by the United States, motivated by the anti-democratic actions of opposition figure Juan Guaidó.
That is why, this March 23rd, We have opened a criminal investigation on the grounds of the seizure of these resources of the Venezuelan state that could have been devoted, among other purposes, to the Covid-19 pandemic and the purchase of vaccines for this virus, the purchase of medicines, the purchase of food. We are not just talking about figures. We are talking about the seizure of Venezuelan assets for an amount of $7 billion that belong to the people of Venezuela, that belong to the Venezuelan state, which have been plundered under the illegitimate excuses of the United States government and the governments associated with this criminal action that has been condemned by the United Nations.
The Attorney General also denounced that the United States' unilateral actions and sanctions also, and the blockade and seizure of Venezuelan assets abroad amount to crimes against humanity.
The sanctions, the freezing of monetary assets, the seizure of Venezuelan assets amount to crimes against humanity, and the International Criminal Court has this evidence, has the reports in its hands, and must act accordingly. The investigation is known as VESLA 2, and we hope there is a response.
In the United Kingdom, a total of 38 members of parliament have signed a motion on Cuba and the United States blockade. The motion recognizes that the U.S. blockade against Cuba has cost the Cuban economy billions of dollars, causes shortages in essential services, and was aggravated by the Trump administration's last-minute designation of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism. According to the members of the parliament who supported the motion, this designation is a politically motivated move which intensified sanctions against the Cuban people in the middle of the pandemic. The motion calls on the UK government to promote international cooperation with Cuba and encourage the Biden administration to normalize relations by reversing the designation of Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism and ending the blockade. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
En un mundo en constante movimiento, todos los días se generan nuevos sucesos y es necesario conocerlos. Nos preguntamos, ¿qué hay detrás de cada acontecimiento? ¿Cuáles son las consecuencias y cómo nos afectan? Ante estas preguntas, buscaremos poner el punto en la I.
Dot in the I. Saturday, only on teleSUR.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes teleSUR.
Saturdays, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back to From the South. Residents of Rio de Janeiro's Maré neighborhood were being tested for COVID-19 at a center organized by a local NGO, a day before the Brazilian city enters a 10-day lockdown implemented in an attempt to stem a deadly coronavirus surge. Under the measures, only essential businesses will operate and a night curfew will be in place between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., while the city's iconic beaches will remain closed to the public.
Here, the most difficult thing is health. If you look for a hospital, only God can provide one. You are going to die on a bench, you know? You will die without being able to receive care. Many people lost loved ones. Many lives were lost. We have to get well soon and hope that the cure comes soon. We have to take care of ourselves in order to get out of this pandemic soon. I think it worries everyone, but at the moment it is necessary. You have to understand and accept it. The lockdown does not mean today I am not going to work and I will continue to do odd things. This will not help. It will only expand the virus.
Bolivians flocked to the traditional annual Alacitas fair in La Paz this Thursday, delayed by 2 months due to COVID-19. Known as the Festival of Good Luck, Bolivians seek to fulfill their dreams by purchasing miniatures of the items they hope to acquire in the coming year. The event honors Ekeko, the indigenous Aymara god of abundance. This year, the festival has a pandemic-themed twist with miniatures of face masks, hand sanitizer, COVID-19 testing kits, and vaccines for sale. Everyone attending the event this year wears masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19, which has caused 12,000 fatalities and infected more than 260,000 people in the country. The Uruguayan Health Federation called to defend the trade union rights of all workers in the sector, including those working in the private sector. The institution demanded the implementation of a register of health personnel, the definition by the Insurance Bank of the state of coronavirus as an occupational disease, of the payment of 100% of the salary of workers transiting the disease. The Uruguayan Health Federation also called for compliance with the protocol on working and the working environment. Workers insisted that the measures taken by the government are insufficient due to the lack of economic aid to alleviate the social crisis. The government of Chile ratified on Thursday, which will strengthen the controls in 9 communities that will enter to extreme quarantine in the metropolitan region. The Ministry of Defense explained that about 11,000 officials of the armed forces, carabineros, and the investigative police will be deployed in 260 checkpoints in the capital of the country. They will also have the cooperation of the General Cristobal de la Cerda, Metropolitan Mayor Felipe Guevara, and health authorities to apply the strengthening of the controls during the quarantine, where about 14 million people were confined.
What we're doing here is one of the ways to contribute to the healing strategy to contain the pandemic. The territorial controls that are being carried out have increased since last Thursday, but there are also other measures, as for example to implement this weekend, which the single temporary permit is going to be restricted. It will allow us to also have a little more easy in carrying out these territorial controls. Therefore, we will keep the same minutes spent for a minimum of pandemic control. If we are not successful now, this is probably going to spread and we will have a lot more prejudice than the effort that is required today to control this.
European Union Chief Ursula von der Leyen has stated that UK's Swedish pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca must catch up on its promised COVID-19 vaccine deliveries to the European Union before exporting doses to other parts of the world. The comments come a day after the EU announced new restrictions on vaccine exports from member states.
Case with AstraZeneca, I think it is clear for the company that first of all the company has to catch up, has to honor the contract it has with the European member states before it can engage again in exporting vaccines.
Germany's Chancellor said Thursday the European Union wouldn't stop supplying the UN-backed effort to provide COVID-19 vaccines to poorer nations after the bloc moved towards stricter export controls for jabs produced in its territory.
also not stop any deliveries to COVAX, but it will also be ready right now to strengthen COVAX and also to provide vaccines to African countries. For example, in addition to what is exported quite legally and within the framework of payments also to non-European countries and also to Great Britain, of course. But we have agreed with the European Commission that if companies do not honor their contracts, then of course export restrictions are more likely than if companies honor their contracts with the European Union. At the same time, however, it was also rightly said yesterday, when it comes to Great Britain, that we also want to assume a win-win situation here. That is, we want to act in a political sensible way, because it is far somewhat more complicated than one thinks at first glance.
On Thursday, the Russian Federation started production of its third vaccine against COVID-19, called Covivac. Phase 3 clinical trials of the vaccine candidate developed at the Mikhail Chumakov Research and Development Center are scheduled to start this month with 3,000 volunteers. Unlike the Sputnik V and Epivac Corona vaccines, the second dose of Covivac will be injected 2 weeks after the first, instead of 3 weeks as in the case of the other two shots. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us.
Who's moving the chess man? What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? The board is deployed there. Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on teleSUR. Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali analyzes the international media influence driven by the empire, acts as an analysis of political, economic and social life throughout Latin America through our stream and website in English. A critical space committed to truth to determine the conjuncture that moved the world today. The world today. Mondays on teleSUR. Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber, el futuro está aquí.
Atomy. Monday, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back to From the South. In France, coinciding with the Night of Solidarity, several associations supporting the homeless and asylum seekers set up 300 tents in a central Paris square. The move in La Place de la République by several hundred people came shortly before the start of the curfew imposed due to COVID-19. Several associations of the Requiescence Collective, which campaigns for vacant buildings to be provided as housing for the homeless, noted that they don't plan to budge from the area until accommodation and better living conditions are provided. The collective stressed that there are 3 million empty homes and yet thousands remain on the streets.
We are here to remind the government to take its responsibilities. Otherwise, we will do other actions. We can't. Today, unlike last time, we have families, we have babies. We can't. Whether I am a member of a collective or not, as a simple citizen, I cannot accept to see families, babies, sleeping under the bridge.
And later in the evening, French security forces and volunteers evacuated hundreds who gathered and set up tents in the Parisian square. Similar scenes were seen throughout 2020 as police forcefully moved asylum seekers from camps set up in different parts of the country. United States lawmakers and the CEOs of top tech firms participated in a Capitol hearing on Thursday, the latest in a series of events examining the policies of these platforms. The hearing featuring the top executives of Facebook, Google, and Twitter got off to a stormy start, as lawmakers rejected the claims by the CEOs regarding their efforts to keep harmful content off their platforms. During the hearing held remotely by video conference, Democrats slammed the platforms for failing to act to stem misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines, amplifying false content and incitement to violence ahead of the January 6 Capitol violence. Republicans, meanwhile, revived complaints that social networks were biased against conservative. President Joe Biden said this Thursday at his first press conference since taking office that his government is in negotiation with Mexico so that the neighboring country will receive back all migrant families arriving at the border except for minors.
Mexico is refusing to take them back. They're saying they won't take them back, not all of them. We're in negotiations with the President of Mexico. I think we're going to see that change. They should all be going back. All be going back. The only people we're not going to let sitting there on the other side of the Rio Grande by themselves with no help are children. And what we're doing there, and it's an important point to understand. I know you understand it. I don't mean to say it that way.
President Joe Biden said that it's difficult for U.S. troops to leave Afghanistan before May Day, but he expects the military presence will not last long.
Is that it's going to be hard to meet the May 1 deadline. Just in terms of tactical reasons, it's hard to get those troops out. So what we've been doing, what I've been doing, and what Secretary Blinken has been doing, we've been meeting with our allies, those other nations that have NATO allies who have troops in Afghanistan as well. And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way.
The Election Committee of Israel resumed this Thursday the counting of votes to officially determine the winning party in the parliamentary elections. According to estimates by the electoral institution, with 93% of the ballots counted, the Likud party of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu occupies at least 52 of the 61 seats required to allow the winning union to form a government. Opposition parties have at the moment 57 and 4 seats in the assembly respectively, waiting for a pronouncement of minority parties to support, with their votes obtained to the parties that lead the computation. The election committee reported that the recount of votes could be completed on Friday. Eleven people were killed in attacks in western Niger late on Wednesday. According to local authorities, the assailants arrived on motorbikes and raided 3 villages near the Malian border. The triple attack was the second on the same 3 villages in less than a year, and is the latest in a string of raids in the poor Sahel state that have claimed more than 300 lives since the start of the year. The villages lie close to each other in the lawless tree-border area, where the frontiers of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso converge. Thousands of people have been displaced from a poor neighborhood in Sierra Leone's capital, in the Freetown, which was destroyed by a fire on Wednesday. Several victims of the blaze in Susan's base offered their testimonies about the events.
Really struggled to stop the fire. They came and went with equipment and went to the sea to get water, up until the fire started to diminish, with the help of the young people that were around.
I was at the market when I heard about the fire, so then I came back here and there was no way for me to enter my house. I just fetched my children.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.
En un mundo en constante movimiento,